They're getting a bit insurrection-y since this Usaid thing touched off. Play the clip.
We are at war. Anytime a person can pay $250 million into a campaign and they be given full access to the Department of Treasury of the United States of America, we are at war.
And so here we have Representative LaMonica McKeever telling her crowd the nation's at war, flanked to her right with Representative Maxine Waters, who has been seen in another clip saying,
"In a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd.
You create a crowd.
And you push back on them.
You push back on them.
They're not welcome."
Again, treason is a crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to overthrow a sovereign or government. Partly with Elon's help, Mike Benz, a former State Department staffer, has controlled the algorithm on this topic of Usaid. This video, uploaded with Benz as the original source, provides an easy-to-understand overview of the Usaid topic.
Is simply capacity building. It is local and regional capacity building done across the whole world, i.e. internationally. The primal id in USAID, international development, is about capacity building of assets that can be used by either the Pentagon, the State Department, or the CIA for their own activities. So if you're the Secretary of State and you were asked by the National Security Council or the President to do something in a different country, overthrow their government, stop the passage of a bill in a foreign country's legislature. How would you do that? And the first thing that I said is you would look at the assets that already exist in the country. Do we need new assets in addition to the ones that we currently have, or are the existing assets, can they achieve this simply by giving them enough money, giving them enough resources, giving them enough training, giving them enough support? One of the main ways that capacity building would be financed would be through USAID. USAID would say that it's doing something, funding a hospital system, funding universities, funding civil society organizations, funding media institutions, funding independent media in the region. Sorry, it's something in my eye. Independent media in the region on USAID payroll. And those institutions, those assets, would then be bigger and more powerful and more capable, more capable of serving the State Department's goal, aka advancing U.S. national interests. USAID has a bigger budget than the State Department, over $50 billion. It is a bigger budget than the CIA. The entire intelligence community only has about 72 billion. So that's the CIA plus the 16 others. And USAID has a bigger budget than the CIA and is almost the size of the entire intelligence community combined. That is how important USAID is to American statecraft. It is an intelligence community, a State Department, and a Pentagon assistance organization rolled into one. I just copied this from the USAID website. USAID carries out U.S. foreign policy, advances U.S. national interests by promoting broad-scale human progress. At the same time, it expands stable, free societies, creates markets and trade partners for the United States, and fosters goodwill abroad. The operative phrases here are carries out U.S. foreign policy. This is not charity work. This is not aid. This is cynical, self-serving purposes. And what is it seeking to do? Free societies, open societies. Why does USAID want other countries to be open societies? Because that's how you get the influence in. If a country is a closed society, they're closed off from USAID influence. We cannot capacity build our assets there. Closed societies box USAID out. China is a closed society. That is why we have not been able to topple the government of China, despite having tried for 100 years now almost. We have not been able to topple Putin from Russia. Why? Because Russia is a closed society. Like China, they kicked USAID out. It is not an open society. And so the USAID can't just take over their entire media ecosystem by funding 100 different media propaganda outlets in the region to sway hearts and minds. And remember, that's what this is. It's hearts and minds and cash. That's what soft power is. They call it hearts and minds work, but it's cash that does the moving of those hearts and minds, especially of the leaders of the movements.
Now, the total annual budget that USAID has access to is disputed. In proposed community notes, there's a claim that really it's only $22 billion and smaller than the State Department's $52 billion annual budget. The cited website is usaspending.gov. Here we have the Department of State, and we're told that $57.2 billion in funding is available for 2025 through date December 30th, 2024. The same website claims that for the Agency for International Development, USAID, $892 million is available up through December 3rd, 2024. AI gives the answer of $42 billion, and I think it may be in reference to this statement, the president's fiscal year 2025 budget request. And so we know that the $42 billion amount was what was requested. And this is considered to be 1% above the 2023 estimate. And because this presidential request was under the Biden administration, we see the priorities: the climate crisis, food insecurity, threats to democracy, global health security, and the need to increase the adoption of open and secure digital technologies globally. He charges Usaid to respond to humanitarian crises globally. Here on the Joe Rogan Show, Mike Benz shares his concern for USAID's real function.
It's sort of a switch player. There's no aid in USAID, by the way. That's, your brain is being tricked when you see the phrase USAID. It's not an aid organization. The aid in USAID stands for U.S. Agency for International Development. It is developing internationally around the world all of the institutions that the State Department needs to use. So when they are capacity building activist groups in a foreign country, that's because the State Department wants those activists there. Now, USAID, for the first time in its history, it was created in the early 1960s by JFK, 1961. It was created because you had all of this intelligence, statecraft, and military support and logistical aid that was tripping over itself, basically. The military would be funding, would be running aid to certain groups in the region. The State Department would be running aid to certain groups in the region. The intelligence community would, and there was no sort of central coordinator of those capacity building operations. So USAID, by the way, is a $50 billion budget. The entirety of the intelligence community is only $72 billion. So it is as more than the CIA.
Poster Ron Rule notes, USAID is only 0.7% of the federal budget. If they found this much fraud and waste in one tiny piece already, imagine how bad the rest of it is. So am I trying to conceptualize what USAID does? So I think, okay, so we have this scenario where you have Bolsonaro, who's a right-wing guy in Brazil, leading that country. The State Department decides they have to do regime change in this country. So they have certain leftist resources on the ground here in this country. They use USAID as a central mechanism for funding some of those independent media who help to persuade people in this region. So then in that case, the right, or I guess really the left politicians are promoted here. Now that should really in no way directly benefit the Democrat politicians in this country, United States, right? So then I'm still scrolling through the timeline here, and then I come across this: Obama's mother, Stanley Ann Dunham, consultant on international development, USAID. So just getting a sense of the tentacles of this organization. So various people who grew up in American influence, they are on the inside, their parents are, and they're helped out a bit. They're given positions. And so we have this post from Leading Report: breaking 97% of all political contributions from USAID employees went to Democrat candidates per Daily Wire. If you're politically on the right side with the State Department and you're an American company, you too can become a beneficiary of a USAID contract. An example with this post is Pfizer.
Pfizer. CBS Health Watch, sponsored by Pfizer. Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer. Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer.
And so you can see the circle of influence. You have your specific organizations receiving their USAID contracts. Those organizations can influence entities on American soil. One organization can then sponsor ad buys in U.S. media corporations. So it's just like a circle of who you know, which side you're on. And clearly Elon Musk is done with that. Here in his pinned post, he notes how Chuck Schumer is mad at DOGE because DOGE is dismantling radical left shadow government in full view of the public. This is our one chance to return power to the people from an unelected bureaucracy back to democracy. Only with the support of you can this succeed. Thank you, unknown soldiers. And so here's Chuck Schumer on DOGE.
Secret group to run rampant through the executive branch. Being innovative is good, but Mr. Musk, this isn't a tech startup. These are public institutions that deal with things like Social Security and Medicare and national defense and provide for the well-being of the American people. And the American people have a right to be part of that debate.
Oh, yes, we are, Chuck. We are. Flanked by Demon King, Senator Chuck Schumer. No, seriously, this guy told an unseen spiritual entity to leave the chair. See, he has some demonic powers. So he stands supportively to the right shoulder of House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries as he spouts this nonsense.
Relates to lowering the high cost of living. At the same time, they are raiding the government, attempting to steal taxpayer money. That's what the situation at the Treasury Department is all about. We will introduce the Stop the Steal Act in short order to prevent unlawful access with respect to the Department of Treasury's payment system connected to people who are trying to steal personal, sensitive, and confidential information. They've done nothing as it relates to lowering.
So I'm not sure at what point this crosses over from political rhetoric to seditious activity. So when you have like a department of the government, one that was created for government efficiency by Trump, being characterized by the House Minority Leader as stealing intellectual property from another portion of the government, it raises up questions, especially with the name of the act. So the act itself is totally performative to the Democrats because Trump's not going to sign anything into law that dismantles what DOGE is doing. He calls it Stop the Steal. It's like the entire presentation here is just projection and confession by projection. I know you guys won't fall for such things. More to come.